Right. Um, Good morning, dear friends. And we are told that cold weather is coming. Yeah, that's what I say. But today, something of interest to us all. Our friend David will be continuing his talks on alternative power supply. David.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Ray. I think there was something in the title about community energy at scale, and that
Yes.
comes into the chat. And you've all been, I'm not surprised the audience has dwindled over the years, but you've all been incredibly tolerant of my contributions on and off about energy and other topics. And I I I rather imagine that sometimes it's what is he talking about? And it must become quite puzzling at times. And the other question that comes to mind is anything ever going to come of this? We've heard this and we've heard that, and community energy for everybody. And I have got obviously, the revolution has not happened yet. Quite clearly, you can walk down the streets and not see roofs covered with solar. But the last year and the last weeks have seen significant changes, and I'm going to talk about this. This will be recorded. The recording will be circulated. It will be able to be found on YouTube, and underneath the recording in the description box, there'll be a link to some of the things that I talk about, and possibly to I've been starting to, based on doing these talks, I've been starting to do a rather strange blog. And in my rather strange blog, I have a Zoom conversation with just me. and sometimes Chat GPT sitting on my phone, and with the AI from Zoom turned on. And I record a little blog piece about the progress of the project I'm working on. And I'll put a link to that as well, because I've got 7 or 8 now, and they're talking about, the idea of having a blog, the start of business planning, which was about a year ago, a little bit before that, but the money didn't start coming in until about this time a year ago. We being Resilience Network that I'm working with, newly formed the year before last in Bristol, to help communities tackle climate change, the shocks that are coming. And we revived an old project that I'd worked on 4 or 5 years ago called Lockleys Loves Solar, where the idea had been, let's put a solar farm on lots of people's roofs in Lockleys and share the energy between those houses. And it turned out that the cost of solar was coming down. The cost of storage was still a bit expensive. Yes, message. Can I call you later? The cost of storage still quite expensive. So we were going to be able to put solar on people's roofs, but if you weren't at home during the day, you wouldn't obviously be using much of the solar. And if we put batteries in your house so you could use the solar, put up the cost of the electricity so that it was almost as expensive as mains electricity.
Yeah, right.
The economics didn't quite work out, but 3-4 years later, the cost of batteries has halved and halved again. And the cost of solar has come down. And we think that it's about reached the point where you could put solar on your roof, or rather, here the trick is what we want to do that's special is, and this is what we hope that you'll be able, we hope to hold meetings later this year where you'll come along to a community centre and you'll have tea and cakes and a little talk. And in just a few minutes, we'll explain that we've got the opportunity to put solar energy on your house with some storage. It won't cost you a penny. But what will happen is you'll join our energy club, and the electricity company that we're working with will keep track of the solar that you're using and generating. And your electricity bill will be sort of like if you've got a white meter and storage heating, then your electricity bill, or if you haven't, sometimes your electricity bill has got gas on it as well. Or if you haven't got gas, it may have white meter electricity coming down cheap at night to run your storage heating. And we're hoping that you'll have, and this is your solar bit on your bill, and you'll see how much you generated, and that you got that cheaper, and that your energy bill is discounted by this amount. We just want to make it that simple. But surprisingly, it is that simple. It will be that simple. It won't be complicated for people to get involved in, we hope. We may or may not be able to do it for every household. And we may or may not be able to generate electricity on a roof over there and get it to your house, which isn't suitable for solar, but shared in the neighborhood. Now, this is where it all got complicated, because this is what we really wanted to do. And we weren't set up for it. And weren't was until just a couple of weeks ago. Apart from this is as good a way to ease into the talk as anything. In the year 2000, and when was it? I made a note. I got my little notes here. And I did a rehearsal of this talk last night in one of my blog pieces. Energy Local, Hacking Energy, November 2016. So 9 years ago, nearly 9 years ago, I went to a conference in Manchester called Hacking Energy, and I saw a wonderful lady engineer called Mary Gilly giving a talk about hacking the energy system. And what she had figured out was that you could exploit a provision. Hattie, how lovely to have you. Hattie always has something to say on my energy talks, and I've got some relatively good news for you and for everyone, Hattie. So Mary was saying that she was setting up an energy club. And in this energy club, what you join the club and your neighbors and your friends, but also in the club was a hydropower scheme. The sort of standing out like this is quite different from all the other members. And what Mary had realized was that the regulations allowed you to have a business or an enterprise with more than one site. So you could have a little head office and 20 sweet shops in a town. And you wouldn't want your managers to have to be dealing with the electricity bills. So you wanted one consolidated energy bill. And obviously that's completely fair enough. What could go wrong with that? And Mary Gilly said, well, I can think of something I can do with that. And what she was wanting to do now, if you build a wind turbine, like our friends have done in Lawrence Weston, our friend Charles and his team, they've put up a wind turbine, and it's 4 megawatts, and it puts out energy at 110,000 volts. Now, obviously, that is going to give you a nasty shock if you stick your fingers on the wires. Very nasty shock. And that's not fed into Lawrence Weston, it's fed into the grid. And it has to be sold to, a licensed energy supplier, not to an ordinary household. And they buy the electricity at, wholesale price, and it ends up being sold to people at retail price. And the wholesale price can be as little as, threepence, fourpence, fivepence, sixpence, tenpence, more now because the prices have gone through the roof. But when this was being planned, we were paying about 14, 15, 16 pence a unit for electricity. So it's quite a markup between the wholesale and the retail. And it's like, how do you get round that? And Mary used this clever hack. And she said, well, okay, so we'll connect a few things to each other and to one electricity company to keep track. And we'll have people on half-hourly metering, and we'll be measuring what they're using. And look, one of the sites is generating electricity. Oh, what a surprise. I hardly even noticed that. Well, never mind. We'll still just go for that one bill. And so what the group gets is a bill that is netted. It's net of the generation and the use. So the hydropower scheme is generating 100 or 200 kilowatts of energy. And amongst these households, they're using, it's probably only a 50 kilo. I don't know what size the hydro scheme is. Maybe it's 50 kilowatts. And you've got these 100 households using an average of a kilowatt. And that 50 kilowatts is netted against those 100 kilowatts. So the entire scheme is on average only using 50 kilowatts. And the energy company is figuring out the bills. And what it's doing is it's saying, instead of paying the hydro scheme a wholesale price and the customers paying retail, let's agree on an agreed price that's a little bit less than retail and a little bit more than wholesale. So the generator's getting a little bit more, so they're encouraged to do more generation, and the customers are paying a little bit less, so they're encouraged to join the scheme. And that price they called the match price, and it was I guess it was a bit of an arm wrestling contest,
The what price?
Match. So the match price.
Match.
That's
Okay, right.
the jargon for it. And what you were doing out of this was eliminating the network charges, right? So the network weren't getting anything. You were getting there weren't any transmission charges between the place generating the energy and the people using it. And you think, well, that's great. We're saving some money, but I can't imagine the grid are going to like that. They want their pound of flesh. It turns out they get their pound of flesh anyway because we're all paying a standing charge for using the network, and using the local network. And so there was a sort of a bit of a conversation went on in community energy, and that's why it's taken so long. And I can remember going to a conversation, and the community energy man for Bays, government's community energy, a man called Patrick Alcorn, very, very smart man, very intelligent, gave a presentation on the government's community energy policy, what it wanted to do to encourage people. And he took questions from a lot of people. And at one point he mentioned, the government is aware that communities are trying to act so that all their generation appears behind the meter, as it were. And what this means, actually, if you've got solar on your roof and you're using the energy, then you use the energy and you're not importing electricity. That you're not importing electricity, so you're not buying as much electricity, and the energy company doesn't even see it on a good day with some people's solar, and that solar is called behind the meter because it's not being metered and it's not being charged. And so Patrick Alcorn is saying, we're aware that communities are trying to make all their generation behind the meter. And he sort of stabbed his thumb at the air and pointed at the assembled throng and said, and we are going to act to prevent this. They'll figure out a way to stop you. We've seen you coming. You're naughty boys and girls. And he explained that, we do need the grid. We can't do away with the grid and have everybody generate all the energy. That London cannot possibly generate all its energy. And so we have to have a national grid, and and the rest of the country kind of has to pay for that grid to feed energy to London. Yes, well said, Hattie. But actually, what happened was a conversation with the generators and a government that is minded to help communities generate their own energy, and kind of aware that, well, if you've got solar panels on your roof in your housing estate, you might want to have a battery down by the substation and collect that storage
Yep.
and energy, and you might want to ship it around in your estate. And you are, after all, paying a standing charge. Everybody's paying a standing charge for use of the network. Even if you're not buying any electricity at all, you're paying, I don't know how much it is, 26 pence more now a day, a day for using the grid. And they've sort of said, okay, that's fair enough. So there's a conversation gone on, and over a long time, and with very much Mary Gilly and her crew saying, we want to make this boon that we've got. Her project was running in a kind of playpen. She got a special dispensation to run this project. We know it's naughty, but it's an interesting experiment and we'll let you do it, but you can't just do it everywhere. And they had a succession of energy companies working with them to do the billing. First of all, it was Co-op Energy, and then Co-op Energy went out of business, but passed it on to Octopus Energy, and Octopus Energy kept it going. And there's complications in doing the billing program to do this. And then another company called, is it 100 Pure or 100 Energy? One of the earliest renewable energy companies is now working with Energy Local. So there's some progress, people working on these things. So we're getting there. We're getting there slowly. And I went to a community energy conference just a couple of weeks ago, run by the Southwest Net Zero Hub in Taunton, at a cricket club. So we went down on the train and got a taxi to the cricket club, which turned out to be only 5 minutes walk from the station. But the taxi driver made sure we went round the houses, so it looked like we were paying him some good money. And there was this lady from the grid. What was her name? Sarah Jeffrey from National Grid Energy Distribution. So the way that the national grid works is there's a sort of spine of very high voltage, very high power electricity in the country called the transmission network. And then there are local areas with distribution networks, and they all used to be the Central Electricity Generating Board, and in the Southwest we had SWEB, the Southwest Electricity Board, and then that became privatized and it was Western Power Distribution. And funnily enough, it's just been bought up by the company who run the grid, and it's now called NGED, which is National Grid Energy Distribution, I guess. And we had Sarah Jeffrey from NGED saying, well, P441 has just been authorized. And P441 is what I would call an enabling regulation. No wiring has been changed, nothing has been done, but it allows energy retail companies to treat local networks with netting schemes within a substation area at the 110,000 volt level. So where the national grid comes, or the distribution network comes roaring into an area, and the voltage is stepped down from 300,000 volts to 110,000 volts, the area of that substation can be treated as one single whole. Now, the energy companies aren't set up to handle microgrids properly yet, except some of them are. And so, what we've been doing for the last year is holding our breath and pussyfooting around and bringing together the people within the community and Mary Gilly as if this was all going to happen and it was going to work. And if it didn't, then we'll say, okay, we'll just do the simple thing. We'll do a scheme where we put solar on your roof and we get the energy company to monitor it. But we've put the solar on your roof. So you're somebody who hasn't got a lot of money or hasn't got the well, you know, the craziness. I mean, my sister's got solar on her roof, and she's twice had to have the people who put the solar on her roof in to fix it. Only they went out of business, so she's twice had to find people to come in and fix it. And people hear these stories, and they don't want to deal with those hassles. And lots of people haven't got the money or haven't got a roof suitable for solar. And we're saying, let's have the community be the intermediator for all this. We'll find the money, we'll put the solar on your roofs, and instead of getting the electricity for free, you'll get it cheap. But we'll figure out a scheme. And 3 years ago, we had this plan for Lockleys, and the savings weren't so great. And then along came COVID. So this was before COVID. It's more than 3 years now, and Bristol, and we were doing it with the wonderful Bristol Energy Company, a wonderful, great, enthusiastic team of young people were saying, this is a good idea. This is the sort of thing we want to support, like Co-op Energy was doing for Mary's project in Bethesda. And they were going to do our scheme, and we were saying, you know, how are you going to handle it? Your billing system, you know, it would be quite complicated. And then they said, oh well, you know, when for the first houses, you're not doing many at first. We'll just keep track, and we'll figure it out on a spreadsheet, and we'll enter it as a manual adjustment, and you can start as soon as you like. And we went, right, we're not going to have to wait 2 years for you to write some software. You're happy to have some people in a corner fiddling around on a spreadsheet. And they said, yeah, we're happy to do that. You know, get your project going. This is interesting. This is good for Bristol. Didn't happen, but we're back. We're back. And you can be forgiven for wondering whether anything would come of this. And I can be forgiven for, you know, keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that we would find the energy companies who could do this. One of the groups we were working with is a company called Zenergy, who are in Brighouse, in which I guess is in Yorkshire, and they've figured out how to do this for a housing association, where the people don't actually pay an energy bill; it's part of their rent, but the housing association are nevertheless interested to have solar on the roofs just to make the saving and to pass on a lower energy bill to their tenants. So there are all sorts of people working on this, and we're getting somewhere. And at the end of the year, we had used up pretty much our grant money, and we wrote up our feasibility study. And then we went to this event, and we found out that this piece of enabling regulation has come into place, and we've been already applying for some grant money and to do the business planning, to get this all figured out and to do the engagement with the community. And we'd held a technical meeting where we brought together Bristol Energy Co-op, who are going to help us do the, you know, they put solar on school roofs and community centre roofs, and they've got some solar farms. And they haven't done domestic solar because it's complicated and you can't really do it. But now you can, and they're up for working with us, as are others in the community. Bristol Energy Network will help us train people to, once they've got solar on their roofs, to do other things to their houses, bits of retrofit work, and so on. So you can see I'm relatively upbeat. The truth is I'm slightly petrified by the scale of the project, partly because the government have said, Well, we're prepared to invest 400 million a year in communities to grow community energy. What would you do with it? And Community Energy England is saying, all the years we've been running, we've only got 400 million quid's worth of renewable energy in place, 400 megawatts, somewhere around that. So this is everything we've already done before in one go. But actually, the country has got 40 gigawatts of community energy, of renewable energy. So what communities have got is only 1% of what the country's got. And guess who likes solar farms and wind farms least? And the answer is the Council for the Preservation of Rural England. They really don't like solar farms and wind farms that much, but they're not against progress. So what they've said is, look, it's all right. We don't mind our members. We don't mind farmers having solar farms, but we've had a look at where you live, your towns and your cities, and there's room for 40 gigawatts of solar on your roof. That's a huge amount. Why don't you do that first? Right? And, fair point, because if you put solar directly on people's roofs, it's actually per kilowatt of panels more expensive than putting it on fields, because you can work your way through a field pretty efficiently where you put up scaffolding, put solar on the roof. But when you put solar on people's roofs, they can use the electricity directly. So they end up, the extra cost of the panels is compensated for by the very short distance that the electricity's got to go, and the fact that you're looking out the retail markup. So while most community energy at the moment is on solar farms or on schools or just one or two wind turbines and the odd hydro scheme, the big opportunity, the huge opportunity, is to put solar everywhere, and to do it in such a way that it's not a hassle, not expensive for people. It's not that you've got to think about it. You're just signing a little consumer agreement that's been through between the members of the co-op and our lawyers to be as fair as possible, not for the people generating the energy, but for the people using it. Oh, hang on a tick. You're also the people using the energy. So as fair as possible for everyone, right? So we're going to have a co-op, which may eventually be lots of co-ops spread across the country. One in Batley, one in Leeds, one in wherever. But we're starting off with one in Bristol, and we're going to share energy around. And I've been mentioning all these different things. So since that meeting the fateful meeting in Taunton, we at ResNet have had really great meetings with the people from the grid and with people from the energy company Centrica, because they have a grant scheme. They have Electricity for Tomorrow, EFT. We'll see where we go. I've got some slides that we showed them. They had a competition and they were offering £100,000, and we thought, well, let's try for it. And we wrote in and we got a call back, and they said 80 people applied and we're only shortlisted 10. And we went, oh, okay. And they said, no, you made the shortlist. So guess what? We have a pitch day, and you roll up on a Microsoft Teams meeting, and you get to present to half a dozen senior people at Centrica. And, you've only got 10 minutes and 10 minutes for questions, so it's not long. But if you want, you can just talk, or you can do a presentation. And we thought, well, me and Iris, my buddy partner in crime in this, Iris Partridge, we could each talk for 10 or 20 minutes quite easily, and have done so at events. And so we prepared a little slideshow and had an agreement that we'd do 5 slides each, and that would use up the 10 minutes. And there were some questions at the end. And afterwards, they called back and said, yeah, it was great. They liked it. And it's, very thorough. It's ambitious. It's scalable. It's complex. It's interesting. It's quite revolutionary. It really is innovative. And you're thinking, yeah, great. Where's the money? And he said, we think it needs to go in a different direction. Souffle flattened. We think you need help, and we want to offer help from our is it electrified energized futures, and we'd like you to join our local res project, which is a European project with lots of participants. And we were going that's 100,000 grant.
What was that European project called?
Local res, LOCAL RES, and capital RES. I'll put links to both of them on the video, so you're able to find them. So it's a few universities and energy companies and communities with local energy projects, and we may get thrown in with all these others as part of local res. But what Centrica have got is they formed an energy company in Belgium on the back of finding a couple of guys with patented technology for optimizing the way that solar panels work with storage. And we're going, yes, that's exactly what we want. And they've got a billing system. They've got 24 million customers, right? Not all in England, but Centrica actually own the gas grid. They own the gas network. They own British Gas over here. So they've got loads of customers that, for British Gas, to whom they also sell electricity. So there's this wonderful energy community across the country. And we feel we're just stepping into the point where we can actively plan this project, because the enabling regulations that we need, we've had the idea for years, but the regulations haven't permitted it broad scale. We've been planning for the last year as if at some point we would be able to, with a fallback position if we couldn't, where we wouldn't network the stuff. We'd just account for the solar from your own roof, but we'd make it easy for people who wanted solar. We'd promote solar with no risk. So there you go. What do you think? I'm sorry, I've rabbited on for over half an hour. I'm happy to deal with your astonishment, amazement, disbelief, or whatever. And interested to know, Angela, I see a finger in the...
Yeah, well, years ago, my brother, who's got he lives in the Romney Marsh, which is a windy place.
Yep.
And he put solar panels on his roof. But he was saying to me, there are solar panels, and some of them are rubbish, and there's a different cost. And yes, now I don't know. I've lost touch with him. He writes sci-fi books, and he doesn't like to be disturbed. But it is the case. He has solar panels on his roof. He gets free electricity. But he said there are some solar panels which will not last long. Some are heavier than others. And given that, our little terraced house was built in 1905, the roof might not be strong enough. So there are loads of, issues. I don't understand any of them, but I do know a few facts about what happened when my brother put solar panels on his roof quite a few years ago. So, are there costs? Are there some, the Channel 4 News and local news often has the issue about solar panels on farms, and we see, meadows with solar panels and the farmers saying no, and the people saying, who support it, saying, well, you could grow things underneath the solar panels, can keep chickens there, So it's a complicated issue, David.
Angela, that's lovely. Once upon a time, not so long ago, In 2011, the government introduced this subsidy scheme called Feed-in Tariff. And you could go to British Gas. British Gas, funnily enough, who I mentioned already, you could walk through Broadmead and you could see adverts saying, we'll put solar on your roof for free from British Gas. So there were businesses offering free solar panels. And what they were doing was saying, look, we've looked at what the government is paying as a feed-in tariff, and we know what we have to pay for solar panels. And we know we can make a fortune on this just from the feed-in tariff. You can have the electricity for free. And what you did was you signed a contract with them called a roof lease that gave them the right to the space above your roof to install the panels. And it was often, really, really tightly locked in because they wanted to make sure they were going to get the revenue for the next 25 or later. They cut it down to 20 years. And you were welcome to have all the electricity you could use, chum, because you're going to pay, you get it for free. But you normally pay 16 pence a unit for electricity and you're going to get some for free. We're going to get 44 pence a unit for every unit we generate. And that's a lot of money. It's more than enough to pay off the cost of the panels. So lots of people, small installers. There was a roofer in Bristol called Paul O'Brien who set up Paul O'Brien Solar. Hattie, give me a moment. I've noted your hand.
Just when was this?
This was starting in 2011 and it carried on to 2018. And the government very quickly realized they'd been over generous and they got a budget for how much they were prepared to put out. And the idea was to kickstart the solar revolution. So we get some experience with it and you get enough volume that manufacturers are saying, oh, I can set up another factory and the panels will cost less and I'll sell more, it's called a learning curve, and it's exactly what happened. And the panels are now much cheaper than they were, and they're much more powerful. At the time of the start of the scheme, panels were 150 or 200 watts. Quite quickly, they went up to 250 watts, then 300. Now it's easy to buy a 440 watt panel. And there's a technology called perovskites, which is another layer you put on the panel, or the manufacturer puts on the panel, and it picks up infrared and ultraviolet and so the solar panel's picking up the visible light and the perovskites are picking up the energy from above and below the visible light, and you should be able to get twice as much energy as you used to get. So, yes, so there's a yes to Angela's question, which is it can be complex, and there's, fly-by-night people. There's all sorts of people saying, we'll offer you solar and you're going to save money. And as soon as this wave goes, we'll be long gone. And if you've got a problem, it won't be our problem. And so on. And Patsy, throw another question in the pot and let's talk.
I've got a couple. The first one is my roof costs quite a bit to maintain. Now and again the chimney, for example, leaks, and that sort of thing. If I were to have solar panels on the roof, who would then pay for the maintenance of the roof per se?
Well, if you come to our scheme, so the idea is, if you join the community scheme, you're not going to a manufacturer who's disappeared. You know where the community centre is, where you went for the talk, and you probably know exactly which person's shins you're going to go and kick if something goes wrong, right? So the idea is, in a community-owned scheme, is that the community owns the scheme, and that you've got somebody who's sympathetic to go to. And even if they've contracted an installer, that installer has done tens, maybe hundreds of installs in an area, and is, it isn't just one householder. I'm not going to do it. Can't be bothered. I've got tons of business from these people. And for our first round of homes in Lockleys, we used a co-op of installers called BASIC, Bristol Area Solar Installer Cooperative. And for the next 10 roofs we did, the feed-in tariff had gone down, and we had to get a really good price. And we actually went to Paul O'Brien Solar, who offered us a good price and who did very good work because they had a maintenance contract. They were doing free solar. They were selling the panels to investors after they'd installed them, but they were running the maintenance contract. So they had to do a solid workmanlike job on the panels. They had to work. So we will set up a scheme where we're hopefully we'll have community groups setting up, local colleges setting up teams who'll do the installs. But there's all sorts of possibilities as soon as you start the idea of we're going to have the community own the panels, we're going to use community, eventually we'll use, hopefully, pension funds, community pension funds to own the panels so that, the return on investment is coming to your pension fund. And your pension fund is investing in your community. Something which it's difficult for communities to do that at the moment. Pension funds have restrictions on them. But, hopefully will work so that the regulations keep improving. And the government are definitely minded to have community energy. It might likely be, often that's you get the chance to invest in commercial schemes. Well, we're saying, yeah, okay, that's all very well, but we'd like the chance to invest in community-owned schemes, and this is how we would like to do it.
You mentioned Centrica, David.
Yeah.
Centrica being the big boys, the one of the very, very large companies who seem to be holding a few of the reins.
Ray, that's inevitable. We know that if you look back in history, you'll find that once upon a time there was a Bristol electricity company and a Bristol gas company, and the gas company was set up first. And when there was talk of setting up an electricity company, they said, oh, it's going to compete with the gas company. And the gas company people said, no, it's great. It's building the market for energy. It's our business is going to go up, not down. Don't you worry, which is exactly what happened. And eventually all of these things became consolidated and became together economies of scale, the use of a national grid network to have electricity mostly generated up north and a lot of it used down south, big generators at Drax and everywhere. And yes, at some point an opportunistic government realized it could make money for its friends and sold it off, like council housing was sold off. But this new government that's come in, the Starmer government, or more especially from a community energy point of view, the Ed Miliband government, because he really understands community energy, and he set up DEC for the Blair government, which did great things for planning renewables and climate change and all the rest of it. Department for Energy and Climate Change, right? That's taking a stand. And they're coming back and saying, we want the country to be net zero by 2030. And we're going, oh, it's 2025 now. If we had some solar on a bunch of roofs by the end of the year, we could have double it the year after and double it the year after that. And by 2030, we could have quite a lot. And they're saying we want to have twice as much on-land wind energy. We want to have 3 times as much on-land solar. We want to have 4 times as much offshore wind, by which time you've got way more energy than you're using on a windy day, and you have to have schemes for storing it. And they're saying, well, we'll turn it into hydrogen and store it under the North Sea, so that and then we can burn hydrogen instead of methane to generate electricity during the winter. So yes, you can't do this stuff, Ray, without big operators. You can't put up a wind turbine in the North Sea unless you're, on the scale of an oil company. And that's what's happening. The oil companies are retraining themselves to do North Sea offshore wind and even deep sea wind on floating platforms. But as a communities, we can, and I was at OVO, our own local energy company. I was at an event just 1 year ago. I get you, Patsy, hand noted. They were saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to be able to do wonderful things with electric cars," right? And they had already set up the biggest scheme with two-way chargers, right? So you charge the electric car with solar during the day, and you use the car's battery to run the house at night. And it's called V2G, vehicle to grid or vehicle to house, or V2E, vehicle to everything. And the battery in a car is much bigger than the battery that you would install for a house. 40, 50, 60 kilowatts instead of 5 or 10 kilowatts you might buy for a battery for your house. And you plug the car in and you let the energy company figure out using artificial intelligence when's best to charge the car from the grid at night cheap meter rate, or when electricity is cheap during the day with solar, and when it's best to sell electricity to the grid in the early evening when the price is best. So and this panel at Everything Electric at the Excel, the guy in charge of electric cars at OVO was saying, yeah, and we get to decide who's going to keep, there's lots of money to be made here. And he said, who's going to keep the money? Is it going to be the energy company or the consumer? And I had my hand in the air, but I didn't get my question. So I nobbled him as he came off the stage. And I said, do you know what? There's more than one energy company. And if consumers get together, they'll choose the energy company that gives them the best deal. So you can imagine that you're going to cream the money off the customers. The customers are going to say, well, hang on a tick, let's make this into more of a partnership. And they were actually, the two-way charges were very expensive. And so their way of getting people to take them was to say, you don't even have to pay. We'll pay you £75 if you take one of our expensive two-way chargers for your EV, electric vehicle, and we'll manage it so that you make money. Your energy bill will go down. And people were typically saving they were saving like £250 a year from their energy bill just because they'd got a battery, and the energy company was cleverly trading the electric vehicle battery with the grid. As the prices go up and down during the day, you don't normally see that, but the energy companies are starting to say, no, there are times in the day that are good for electricity and the times that aren't. And you can join a tariff where you have half-hourly metering, and the price changes during the day. And you can, if you're smart, you can figure out when's best. And if you've got a battery, then you can have a bit of smart electronics that figures out when it is best to buy and when to sell and all the rest of it. Anyway, so I've had a question from everybody now, which is lovely. And this is what's going to happen. We're going to have community meetings, and I will, or Iris or somebody from your community centre will present the idea in 5 or 10 minutes, and then there'll be hundreds of different questions, and we'll try and show that doing it through the community is the best way to do it. Hopefully it's true. Hattie, what do you think?
Who is we? I'm sorry, I must have learned a bit late, joined a bit late.
What has been set up is a group called Resilience Network, ResNet for short. You can look us up. There'll be a link under the video if you don't even need to write it down. Resilience Network, CIC, Community Interest Company. And it's set up really with the overarching aim to help communities tackle the roughness that's coming because of climate change, floods and all that, to become more resilient. So we want to work to strengthen, to make community centres more robust. If you go to a community centre, like as not, they'll say, well, there's things we need to do in our community just to tackle climate change, let alone to adapt to the shocks. And we haven't got the resources to do even that. And we're saying, well, let us work with you we'll find national resources, we'll find finance. And if you help us recruit people in your community, not only will those people get a discount on their power bills, but some of what they save will channel that as a community fund through the community centres and help you build resources. So that's the idea, is that communities need to adapt, to tackle wildfires in Los Angeles, flooding here, earthquakes there, landslips, famine, all of these things. And the first responders in all these cases usually are the community. And they've got problems. You go to a community centre and say, what would you do in a power cut? And they say, oh, we're all right. We've got solar and batteries. And we'll say, and do you know if they work when the power goes down? And they'll look at you and say, no, I don't know. Never asked. I assumed. And you say, no, unless you discuss that deliberately with your installer, they have to put in extra electronics to trip you off the grid and then run from within the grid. And the reason they do that is because if there's a power cut, normally, and your battery kept running, the connection to your house would be live. And if the electricity company are coming around trying to sort out the wiring, thinking it's all gone down, and they suddenly find that it's still live, right? So by default, when the grid goes down, your inverter, the thing that converts the solar electricity to your solar electricity, is converted to mains electricity in step with the grid. And if the inverter can't see the mains frequency anymore, it just stops. So it's a fail safe, but it's a fail safe that fails to, you haven't got light. And we want to put in solar so that your solar and your battery are acting as at least as emergency lighting, first step in an emergency. Yes, I see Patsy's, the speaker who won't shut up recognizes Patsy.
Thank you. I just wanted to, it's really exciting, all this, very exciting. Right now, though, are any of the energy providers better value than the others? I mean, for example, I'm with British Gas and electricity combined at the moment. Would it pay me to change?
Well, you have to believe what you hear. Obviously, different people are differently responsive to customers. At the moment, Octopus have a very good reputation for customer care. OVO used to, I don't know, and then they bought Scottish and Southern Energy, and this little company with 250,000 customers suddenly had 2 million more customers. And it's like a python eats an antelope or something like that, and it takes a while to digest. So I don't know, although OVO's headquarters are just over the road from me, and I'm very keen to work with them. We're keen to work with all the energy companies so that we've got a choice and a backup, because when Bristol Energy Company got sold off by the council, our project just died dead. We'd got a risk register where we said, listed all the possible risks, and one of them was energy company fails, and our response was going to be find another one. But it took us quite some time to find Bristol Energy Company. We had been talking to OVO, and we said, well, we'd like to work with two, but Bristol City Council said, no, you've got to work with us exclusively. And we said, well, what happens if anything goes wrong? And they, nothing can go wrong. Turned out not to be true. So,
what about electricity, the green company?
There's an interesting, when we first approached green, good energy and ecotricity, because they were the obvious ones to us. But what and this was years ago, and they have changed. We know they've changed, so we will talk to them. But their pitch at the time was, we were saying, we want to generate energy off people's roofs and have you help do the billing. And their pitch was, no, you don't understand. We generate the electricity, you buy it, and not at a discount. Where it's premium. This is renewable. You pay more for it, from us, because it costs us more, and it did. It wasn't cheap for them to do solar farms and wind energy, and they had to innovate. So the pioneers were, the very pioneers were typically charging a bit more. But very early on, they helped. We used good energy at Hamilton House to handle our feed-in tariffs when we put solar on the roof. And they were great. We went up to wherever their headquarters is, just up the railway line, and we had wine, and it was Christmas time, so we had wine and mince pies. It was lovely, and we signed up and we got our feed-in tariffs, and they were very nice to us. So there was that time when there were feed-in tariffs, and we knew that there would come a time when solar panels would be cheap enough, and we would have to find a mechanism where we worked with an energy company, not to handle the feed-in tariff, but to do the intricate billing stuff. And that age has arrived, as of this year, really. And the potential for community energy from rooftop solar is far greater than the potential from wind farms and solar farms. But things have changed. Solar panels got cheaper. There's a new form of solar panel, which is double-sided. And so instead of putting it on a field at an angle pointing south, you put it in fields standing upright, going north and south. And so it picks up some of the light in the morning and some of the light in the evening, and you mount it far enough apart that you can have rows of food in between. So the panels are just a divider. And we already know that sheep like the shade of solar panels. So farmers are finding accommodations with solar that get better and better. Patsy.
I hear that in a year or so's time we're likely to have another earthquake, volcano eruption, which is likely to put an awful lot of thick stuff into the air, cloud us over, maybe for as long as 2 years. Would this be a serious thing for us if we go over to a maximum of solar energy, or not so bad as all that? Do you know?
Well, it depends if it's an extinction event or not, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
So, yes, a really big volcano, we haven't had one. Well, there was one in the Middle Ages, wasn't there, somewhere? And there was a couple of winters that were,
No sun. Yeah.
Yeah, solar panels wash down quite nicely, so you probably have to hose down your panels while the air was a bit thick with dust. So, it's not such a problem, but if you haven't got sunlight, you have got a problem. And who knows? I think this is personal. I think that solar panels and all of this renewable energy is a way of weaning ourselves off fossil energy, which we need to do urgently. There are other technologies coming along. In fact, our government has just signed itself up. They're going to do mini nuclear power stations, the sort that, submarines have power stations in them, and Rolls-Royce are absolutely geared up to make mini power stations, which are town-sized, and which aren't such a problem with, building as something like Hinkley C, and aren't quite such a problem with recycling at the end of life. So I'm not so violently against as other community energy types. And there's other forms of energy coming down the pike. There always have been, there always will be. It certainly ain't over. And there are scientists now who are saying that this thing called cold fusion, there's we might find a way of allowing it to happen. And so there will be, we won't be reliant on these intermittent things like wind and solar forever as a race. I'm reasonably confident we will exploit physics in new ways. But we will have got ourselves off fossil energy and into energy that is more sustainable and more secure, that, you know, doesn't double when somebody decides to do a land grab. It's now emerging. We're seeing that America is saying, oh, we're going to get all the rare earth metals from Ukraine. Well, Putin knew all about that, you know, and so flattening Luhansk and the Donbass was basically flattening them in readiness for rare earth mines. But you know, the question is, will Trump let Putin off the hook? And now that somebody's told him that there's loads of rare earth metals in the Donbass and Luhansk, he's saying, "Oh, we'll have that, thank you very much." So there's all these wars are going on because of these resources that, you know, where somebody's got, you know, that our oil is under your country. You've got to let us have access to it, and that's gone on for a long time.
Two of the more future things which I had read about. One, which was you'd have satellites up in space which will collect the solar energy and beam it down, type of thing, which is far in the future. The other one, which I think is interesting, is someone proposed that you'd have panels which you could stick onto your windows, which would collect the kind of the energy and beam it into your flat house, whatever.
Ray, you're absolutely right, and you're behind the times. The Chinese are already planning satellite. Yeah, the Chinese are already planning some satellite-based stuff that will beam down the energy rays. And I think, oh yeah, directed energy weapons. You can point the rays anywhere you like, you know, and take out enemy city. So I don't think that's a good idea. Besides, there's already something up in the sky that's beaming energy down. Do you know what it's called? It's called
the sun.
Yes. So, you know, we've got a way of catching the energy from the sun already. It's called solar energy. You might want to concentrate it with satellites. I think it's probably a waste of time. We've got enough time to put cheap solar energy everywhere before you'd have that running. And what was the other one? Yeah. Windows.
And it was on Windows.
Thin film perovskite panels is perfectly.
Thin film. Could you just say the words again? Perovskite.
Thin film perovskite panels. So basically, thin film solar, which instead of picking up sunlight, picks up the invisible light, the infrared and the ultraviolet. And so panels are coming where you're buying glass, but you can get solar from it and stick on plastic and in Germany, in particular, they've already figured out that you can put solar panels on your balcony where you've got and on walls of a house. It used to be, oh well, you've got to put the solar panels on the south-facing bit of the roof because otherwise, you know, that's where it picks it up max. And in Lockleys, we were doing 20 or 30 roofs, and we said, well, we can afford to run some experiments. And we put some solar panels on east-west roofs. And what you got a little peak of solar in the morning and a little peak of solar in the afternoon and less during the day. But it worked just fine. You got well over 80% of the energy that you would get from south-facing. And even if you put it on a north-facing roof, it's still getting sunlight. It's still going to generate energy. And the cheaper the panels become, the more cost effective it is to just put them anywhere that's got light coming in. or
Tiny.
or infrared. Anyway, I've gone on way too long. We're already 5 minutes over time. Ray, stop me. Somebody, I'm like the Joker in the movie.
Someone stop me.
Eh, is that good?
That's from The Mask by the great Jim Carrey. Somebody stop me. Anyway, right. We are coming to that time again where we stop, and I wander across to Patsy and say, "What's next week, Patsy?"
We've got Barney Smith back. He's going to be talking about whistleblowers in the land registry.
Great.
I saw him yesterday, and he mentioned it.
It sounds very subversive.
Right then.
We need
Wow.
some in these times.
I bumped into somebody who worked with a land registry, and I said, did you know Barney? No, they didn't. I think the land registry is quite large. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it should be fun.
Yeah. Something
Thank
different.
you for updating us, David. That's good, and telling us we're out of date and giving us the next chip.
Well, I'm not mean. Well, it's when I first heard about solar energy and realized the cost was going to come down, I was thinking,
Yeah.
oh no, I don't know anything about it, but
Yeah.
I'm going to have to learn, and my head is going to be full of all of that, and I'm
Love
merely
it.
in a position to share.
I love it.
I'm
Thank
not
you.
accusing anyone of ignorance. I don't want you all to have to go through what I had to go through learning it all. I want to make it nice and easy for everyone.
Well, now I want those plastic layers on my solar panels on the roof. Thank you.
Yeah.
Shall I ask you to give me some kind of direction on that?
I'm not sure if perovskite makeovers are available yet, but I'm sure.
Oh,
And as you know, with wind farms, they'll build a wind farm that's supposed to last for 30 years, and then they discover that they can make much better turbines than they did have, and it's actually worth money taking down the existing turbine and putting up a bigger one. So repowering solar arrays will be a thing. You'll say this roof's got 200-watt solar panels on it, and you can get 500-watt solar panels now. So,
flip over,
yeah, swap them
buy
over.
new ones.
And solar panels can be recycled. It's glass and aluminium and silicon. There's a whole industry coming just to recycle solar panels, and it won't be too horrendous environmentally, he says, crossing his fingers. Thanks everyone for giving me a chance to run through my patter, and
Very exciting, very interesting.
other people pick this up on replay on YouTube.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Folks.
Good.
Bye.
Thanks, Ray. Thank you.